friends, Father Frank Pavone here of Priests for Life. Welcome to End Abortion TV. We're with Dr. Theresa Burke of Rachel's Vineyard. So, Theresa, we've been talking about the fact that someone who says, I'm sorry that I had an abortion, might be the mom, might be the dad, might be somebody else in the family. It's not just a matter of seeking forgiveness. There's a lot of hard work to be done, a journey of grieving and of healing relationships, healing. And this has always been fascinating to me, healing your understanding of yourself. Something I've often pondered about the person that's had an abortion, I'd love to get your comments, is you cross a boundary when you kill somebody. When you take part in a death, you cross a boundary that you now realize that you're capable of doing something that maybe you really never thought you were capable of doing. And it seems to me that then it causes a terrible lack of trust of yourself, of your own judgment, of your ability to make decisions in the future. This can be really paralyzing, can't it?
It sure can. And I think the loss of trust with others, but really the self, is devastating for a lot of people. They don't trust their judgment, and they can vacillate over all sorts of things in indecision. Because they don't want to make another mistake.
Another mistake.
Yeah,
right.
And perfectionism follows that. Sometimes people can get like a little OCD, obsessive about everything, and checking and double checking, because that's the trauma.
Because they've made such a gigantic mistake that now it's just coloring every decision they try to make.
And then the flip side of that would be defending the mistake till the cows come home. Like, I can't let down that armor because everything under it would collapse.
So this is why some of them become crusaders.
Yeah,
right to choose.
So. I think so.
Yeah.
Or advocates of nonviolence. We can't kill a whale or a seal, or, I'm going to become a vegetarian because that's violence and I'm not violent. And there's sort of like a...
that you reminded me just now of something. In 2019, a number of states, starting with New York in January, passed these very extreme laws, taking away protection from babies, even in the latest stages of pregnancy. And people were just astonished at this. In the same year, some months later, that same state of New York passed a law prohibiting the declawing of cats. Is there something going on here psychologically? I mean, as a body, it seems to me that, well, it's also like you were saying, we will overcompensate in these strange ways. We can't acknowledge that, hey, you shouldn't have taken away protection from those babies. We can't acknowledge that, and so, let's give more protection to the animals.
Well, I never heard that, but yeah, sure. Is that the craziest thing you ever heard? Like, what's the point? That we don't scratch each other? But I do think that, if you don't, this is where the symptoms tell the story, and you're trying to find some way to undo or to look like you're compassionate toward living creatures. You don't want them to have pain.
Yes.
We have to, and that becomes the theme that you go into your advocacy for. Because if you're a proponent of that, you couldn't possibly stand for anything that's violent. And that it's a type of undoing and I don't know, conscience scrubbing,
Yes.
And but that's acceptable, and you can talk about that, and you can be proud about the advocacy for nonviolence. So it does feel like
it feels like we're compensating for something. Yeah, it's just such a tremendous societal blind spot. We, of course, have only begun to scratch the surface here of all the damage that's done by an abortion. And one of the things I want to look at is, because there's so much damage relationally between a man and a woman, even if the abortion that one or another of them experienced was not with that particular man or woman. So two people are going to get married, and they go through a marriage preparation. If one of them has had an abortion in his or her past with with someone else. Or perhaps they had it with one another. Should not this be something that comes up in some way, shape, or form during the marriage preparation?
I absolutely think that's critical, because if there's some other problem that you're marrying, somebody in addiction, an alcohol problem, a drug abuse, even a mental illness of some sort, it's really important that the spouse understands and can be present to that suffering. If you go into a marriage trying to keep that secret and life events come up, or your newborn baby's a trigger, or you have postpartum depression, or whatever is going to happen in the future that you don't know, the fact that your spouse is aware that they love you, that they choose to marry you anyway, because the worst thing that anyone feels is if my husband knew this, he never would have married me, or if he knew this, like to have this feeling of being a Confederate, and that the love isn't, if he really knew me, he wouldn't have done X, Y, Z. That's a terrible feeling for to go on in a marriage.
Right.
Because then the acting out is that I deserve punishment, I shouldn't be trusted, and then people start acting out in those ways.
How would you recommend whether it's the priest or a lay person who's guiding a couple through a marriage preparation, broach this topic? Obviously very sensitively, but how would you?
I think we understand so much, and we have so much good research now about the detrimental impact. So to be able to say that if there's been a pregnancy loss in your history, before you go to marriage, this could be a really important and special time for you guys to go through the grieving together. If he wasn't involved or she wasn't involved, go through a healing program together.
Yes.
Because you're going to see from all the people in the group, this is what I would say, that the normal reactions to an abnormal event, that's what post-traumatic reactions are. They're normal reactions to a very abnormal event. And I think it's always validating for the one who suffers to know that they're not crazy when they have these feelings, because this is just part of the symptoms, right? And for their spouse to understand what a trigger is, how they might be triggered, and when they are, what they need, which is loving arms to go around them saying, we're going to get through this. I'm here with you. I love you.
Yes.
And that's a very different experience when there's a trigger than being alone, trying to hide it, trying to compensate around it, trying to run away from it, because then you're going to have moms running away from homes and dads doing their thing. So I just think that it's important. And this is a good time. Like any life transition is a time, even in an annulment. How many annulments are rooted in an abortion before they got married, or early days of the marriage? I write I do the testimonies sometimes for couples because they want the history of the couple and what some of the reasons were that they might not have really understood what they were entering into, or what they were suffering from.
So in other words, put another way, the abortion trauma kept them from entering a valid marriage right from the start, because it was inhibiting.
It can, especially if you're saying, because of this trauma, I don't ever want kids.
There you go.
Yeah,
Right.
If that wasn't discussed, or if there wouldn't be issue, and we hear about this all the time, until it's happening, and if there was a past abortion, they're at 50% risk for repeating just because of the trauma repetition.
Yeah.
And a man who, or even a woman whose partner doesn't, every time there's a baby, it's a big crisis instead of a welcome joy. And it's because of the past trauma, not because everything isn't in place.
Right.
With a house and everything they thought they
all
needed.
That might be.
But the unresolved thing compels people to reenact the trauma. Exactly. And they don't even know why sometimes. And it's baffling to a partner.
That's right. Well, that's why we really encourage pastoral ministers to deal with this in marriage preparation.
Absolutely.
Theresa, let me raise another topic. Someone who has had an abortion, then goes on in life, has other children, raises these children. The fact of the matter is that abortion has damaged her. It damages the family. I mean, like it or not, the damage is there. Give me your perspective and your advice about telling one's child about one's past abortion.
Oh, you asked the best questions, Father Frank. Because there's a simple answer and there's not a simple answer. And I might differ from other people in my opinion, but I'll give you my opinion. I just think that every parent knows their child.
Yes.
And I think the context of sharing the fact that someone had a past abortion needs to happen in a certain context. And this is what I recommend. I recommend that when you're going to tell a child that you have your aunts and uncles of the child, maybe a youth minister, people who know that you're going to do this, people who've already told you that if your child wants to come talk to them, that these are the go-to people who know I'm telling you this. Because a child will always want to protect the parents.
Yes.
And no matter the age, when mommy or daddy's hurting, a child can feel like it's their fault. They can feel like, I have to fix this.
Right.
And they're going to care first about their stability of their home. So I never think anyone should tell a child unless they've gone through healing and they can say it without looking like they're falling apart.
Yes.
And I know that people have sought their child's forgiveness, or they might lay the story on them, but they do it in a lot of tears, and that's a threat to the child.